All right. Thank you, Madam Clerk. I'm going to call this meeting of the Sacramento Regional Transit District Board to order. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Director Budge?
Here.
Director Harris?
Here.
Director Howell?
Here.
Director Hume? Director Jennings? Director Kennedy?
Here.
Director Miller? Director Natoli?
Here.
Director Chenier?
Here.
Director Cerna? Chair Hansen?
I'm here, Madam Clerk.
Okay, I'm going to go back through in case anybody has joined us real quick. Director Hume? Director Jennings? Director Miller? Director Cerna?
Here.
With that, we have a quorum at 87 votes. This meeting of the Sacramento Regional Transit District will be broadcast on Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel on Comcast, Consolidated Communications, and AT&T Uverse. Today's meeting will air on August 26th at 6 p.m. and August 28th at 6 p.m. on Channel 14 and webcast at www.sacmetrocable.tv. It is also closed captioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Director Harris, would you care to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Director Harris is still muted.
Okay, hand over heart and begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Director Harris. Very nicely done. And thank you, Director Budge, for bringing the flag with you. All right.
Cindy finding one.
Yes, it's a team effort. Madam Clerk, will you call the first item?
The first item is the consent calendar, items 2.1 through 2.6.
Are there any directors who have comments or questions or would like to pull an item on the consent calendar?
Seeing none, I'll move approval of the consent calendar.
Thank you. Director Budge motions approval.
Second,
Mr. Chair, this is Member Cerna.
Member Cerna.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to speak to item 2.4. Just wanted to offer my thanks to Olga in particular. I brought this item to the attention of our general manager and worked with our legal counsel over the last couple of weeks on this. I know that I believe you had city legal staff also review it, but I just wanted to offer my thanks to Olga for her help and support on this.
Thank you, Director Cerna. I heard a second from Director Harris. Any other comments from the board? Otherwise, we'll go to public comment if there is any.
No, we need to vote, Chair.
No, I know, but we have to take comments from the public on the items.
Got it.
Yeah, thank you. Madam Clerk, are there comments from the public?
There are no comments from the public, Chair Hansen.
All right, seeing as there are no other comments from the board and none from the public, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Director Budge?
Yes.
Director Harris?
Aye.
Director Howell?
Yes.
Director Hume?
Aye. Here.
Director Jennings is on the phone with me. I'm trying to get him connected. Director Kennedy?
Aye.
Director Miller?
Aye.
Director Natoli?
Aye.
Director Chenier?
Aye.
Director Cerna?
Aye.
Chair Hansen.
Aye.
With that, we have a quorum at 100 votes. The next, can I ask you to hold for 1 second, Chair Hansen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Jeff, this would be a great time to sing us a song if you'd like, or Director Budge, I don't know.
Oh, no, that would not be me.
Okay.
I'm actually ready. I was trying to
Okay.
get Director Jennings connected. Thank you for patiently waiting.
Do we have any members of the public wishing to speak on items not on the agenda?
Yes, I have one, Mike Birnbaum, and I can read his statement.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Greetings, Chair Hansen, Vice Chair Miller, and members of the board. I would like to request information report backs to the board from staff, starting with the September 14th board meeting. Here is the background, and tell me on consensus if you agree with this concept, as a formal vote would not be required here. Coming up on the 30th and 31st, Regional Transit will be implementing its service recovery plan. All service that operated at their pre-COVID-19 service levels will return to normal service with 3 exceptions, according to RT website. I would hereby request ongoing board report backs from staff as to the progress being made to return to service, Route 20 in Folsom, Route 142 Airport Express, and the 2000 series supplemental school trippers. With ride-hailing services like Uber and Lyft threatening to shut down completely in California due solely to the possible reclassification of the drivers of those services, it is imperative that Route 142 resume full service as soon as it is possible, so that airport travelers are not left without a ride or having to wait an hour because things beyond their control cause them to just miss their ride. In closing, I want to thank you for my opportunity to comment. I will be more happy to provide you with my contact information to go deeper into this or any other transit topic at your convenience. Respectfully, Mike Birnbaum. That is the
Thank you.
That is the only public comment that I have.
Thank you, Mike Birnbaum, and thank you, Madam Clerk. We have 2 items of new business, but due to a couple directors who may not be present, depending on how long one item goes, I'm going to reorder the agenda so that we can hear 7.2, the emergency repair order first. Madam Clerk.
Agenda item 7.2, resolution authorizing the general manager CEO to award a sole source public works contract to a qualified plumbing company to perform an emergency repair and or replacement of one or more pipes leaking a significant amount of water under bus maintenance facility 1. This will be presented by Laura Ham. This requires a 4/5 positive vote of the board, which is 80 votes.
Okay. Are there any members of the public signed up for this one, Madam Clerk?
I do not have any members of the public.
Do we have a staff presentation?
We do. That should be by Laura Ham.
All right.
Briefly,
Ms. Ham?
Thank you, Chair Hansen and directors. I would just like to briefly share with you that we have identified a significant leak under BMF1, and we are requesting board authorization tonight for emergency diagnosis and repair services should those be necessary and exceed the public works requirement.
I'm happy to move the item, Mr. Chair.
We have a motion from Director Chenier, second from Director Budge. Any other comments from board members?
I would just say I have chased water leaks all over. I am so sympathetic.
Thank you, Director Budge. Obviously, this is mission critical infrastructure, so that's why the staff brought it forward. With that, Madam Clerk, would you like to call the roll?
I would thank Director Budge,
Yes.
Director Harris,
Aye.
Director Howell,
Yes. Yes.
Director Hume,
Aye.
Director Jennings,
Aye.
Director Kennedy,
Aye.
Director Miller,
Aye.
Director Natoli,
Aye.
Director Chenier,
Aye.
Director Cerna,
Aye.
Chair Hansen.
Aye.
With that, the motion carries at 100 votes. So the next item, Chair Hansen, if I may,
Please.
is item 7.1, Downtown Riverfront Streetcar Project Update.
We're getting sound from Jeff's microphone. I don't know what it is, but Jeff could there. Thank you.
Thank you. There's 4 actions in front of you. Resolution approving the reimbursement agreement for the redesign of the Downtown Riverfront Streetcar Project and Small Starts grant submission with the Riverfront Joint Powers Authority, and a resolution approving the 3rd amendment to the contract for Downtown Riverfront Streetcar Design Services with HDR Inc., and a resolution approving the 1st amendment to the contract for environmental support services for Downtown Riverfront Streetcar Project with AECOM, and a resolution approving the termination of the subrecipient and interagency agreement authorizing project sponsorship and ownership to transfer to SAC-RT, and directing the general manager CEO to negotiate replacement agreements with the cities prior to the dissolution of the authority. And this is presented by Laura Ham.
Thank you again, and good evening to Chair Hansen and the directors. The item before you tonight is an update regarding the Downtown Riverfront Streetcar Project, and is the result of a series of actions by the project partners over the past year and a half. In the staff report, we have provided you with project background dating back to 2014, when the streetcar was approved to enter into project development. The original 4.4 mile streetcar scope was issued for bid in January of 2019, and unfortunately bids were significantly higher than the engineer's estimate at the time. At that time, the mayors of the 2 cities formed a technical working group, including staff of each of the project partners and also representatives from SMUD, the Sacramento Metropolitan Air Quality Management District, the Sacramento's mayor's office, and Congresswoman Doris Matsui's office. The directive of the committee was to present alternatives to the previously proposed streetcar that were within the available budget and preserve the $50 million in congressionally appropriated to the project. Alternatives
Laura, did you want to share a slide presentation? I know that you tried, but it got knocked off by Cindy.
Oh, I apologize for that. Yes, let me try to do that again.
Okay.
I was just showing you the map right now, and I'll pull that back up.
There you go.
Okay.
Do any directors wish to see the earlier? Oh, this is the second slide. You didn't miss anything.
No, it was just the title.
Okay.
So as I mentioned, one of the objectives was to preserve the $50 million in congressionally appropriated funds to the project. We were seeking alternatives that would provide some of the benefits of the original project, including providing mobility and connection between the 2 cities and their existing public transit systems. A project that would be deliverable in the next 5 years, would be scalable, and would allow for future innovation. The project ultimately selected by the partners for recommendation was a streetcar project with a reduced scope, a 1.5 mile project with 1.1 route miles, connecting to the SAC-RT light rail system at the Sacramento Valley Station. The route departs Sacramento Valley Station at 3rd Street, turns west on Capitol Mall, crosses the Sacramento River at Tower Bridge, and ends at Sutter Health Park, where it will connect with Yolo County Transit District and West Sacramento Public Transit Services. The new termini would also serve the future rail yards development and connect to the regional light rail system in Sacramento, and serve the Washington and Bridge districts in West Sacramento. Both districts were developed assuming delivery of the streetcar. There are 3 stops, one at Sutter Health, one at 2nd and Capitol, and one at the Sacramento Valley Station. The total project budget for the revised project is $130 million. That includes $20 million previously expended from the original scope, with an estimated completion in 2024. In describing the amended project in the staff report, I'd like to say that if we overemphasize or underemphasize some points that do not reflect everyone's opinion regarding the project, we do apologize, as we did our best to consolidate the efforts and positions of all the partners regarding this project. Thank you to all of our partners at the cities of West Sacramento and Sacramento, SACOG, and at the Federal Transit Administration, and to Congresswoman Matsui for her guidance through this process and efforts to secure and preserve the original $50 million appropriation. Slide 3 provides a timeline overview showing that construction bids were rejected in 2019, as I mentioned. An update is due to FTA for the small start submittal this month, actually this Thursday, the 28th, and the $50 million earmark expires in September of 2021. I'm going to skip over most of this next slide regarding progress since February of 2019, since I discussed it somewhat previously, but I did want to emphasize that in addition to the efforts of the project partners since February, the board chairs of SAC-RT and Yolo County Transit District boards have been holding 2x2 meetings over the last 6 months, during which they discussed the streetcar and other partnership efforts, such as the Causeway Connection zero emission bus route between Davis and Sacramento last year. So the main item for the board to consider here in issues is that there is currently a funding shortfall to reach final design and a small starts grant agreement, which will need to be addressed within the next 60 days. The funding shortfall could potentially stop the progress of the project that we are restarting. As many of you know, the Sacramento City Council took a number of actions last week, including directing staff to amend the interagency and cost reimbursement agreement and to provide funding of approximately $149,000 to advance the project. The agreement includes 2 work orders with consultants for environmental and design work, which are before you for approval tonight, and will cover SAC-RT staff costs. The City of Sacramento also directed staff to take the necessary steps to dissolve the Joint Powers Authority at the appropriate time and has recommended transition of project ownership to SAC-RT. The city discussed various options to address the current funding shortfall, and as most of you know, requested our follow-up on those steps after the SAC-RT board meeting tonight. Should the board approve the next steps tonight, SAC-RT will ensure that the partners are notified before project funding runs out and that we have adequate time to address the issue. The City of West Sacramento took similar action last week and recommended that the SAC-RT Board of Directors advance the revised downtown riverfront streetcar project. West Sacramento City Council also approved an amendment to the interagency agreement to fund specific work, provided a financial commitment of $2.3 million, and also approved dissolution of the Joint Powers Authority. The project was described as a top priority for the city, originally endorsed under a ballot measure and included in the City Council's strategic plan as part of a broader sustainable mobility strategy. The project has also been specifically included in West Sacramento's significant planning documents. The bridge and Washington districts were developed around streetcar being in place. The City Council approved the new alignment and has recommended that the SAC-RT board take action tonight to allow the project to move ahead. As SAC-RT, West Sacramento, and Yolo County Transit District continue to work together to provide mutually beneficial public transit service, it was also noted in the West Sacramento and SAC-RT staff reports that a separate operating and maintenance agreement between West Sacramento and SAC-RT will need to be developed. This agreement could be similar to the light rail operations and maintenance agreement between SAC-RT and the City of Folsom that was in place for almost 15 years prior to Folsom joining the district in late 2018. It's expected that the cities will be a party to a future agreement with costs shared between West Sacramento, SAC-RT, and other potential partners, and funded by future sales tax revenue and other sources previously identified. O&M costs for the streetcar project are estimated at $1.5 million annually, based upon the current round-trip travel time of 20 minutes, utilizing 1 streetcar vehicle, and 10 minutes during peak hours, utilizing 2 streetcar vehicles. Through several discussions with both cities, SACOG, and the FTA, it's proposed that SAC-RT, currently contracted to deliver and manage the streetcar project, becomes the owner and operator of the streetcar line once construction and startup is completed. Since both cities took action to dissolve the JPA and begin the wind down process, and also took action to recommend SAC-RT ownership of the project, staff recommends that the board approve SAC-RT to own and operate the streetcar, directs the general manager to negotiate replacement agreements with the cities, and approves amendments to the consulting contracts required to progress the project. Upon approval, staff would take actions to submit the small starts application update and the project update due August 28th, as I mentioned before. The last slide regarding project funding is in your packet for reference regarding the overall project budget. But that does conclude my presentation. Our team, including our project manager and director of engineering, Daryl Avanzato, are available tonight to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ham. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment to read?
I do not have any public comment to read.
All right, I'll turn it over to directors for discussion. Depending on how much conversation there is, I'll try to call on people if you raise your hand or give me some kind of signal. I see Director Harris would like to speak. All right, I'll turn it over to Director Harris.
Thank you, Chair Hansen. If any of you watched the City Council meeting last week, you'll know that I was not a proponent of moving forward more money to this project. As you know, Director Hansen and myself sat on the Riverfront Streetcar JPA. We've worked on this project for, well, I've worked on it for 5 years. Steve, I think more than myself. This revisioning of streetcar project is nothing like what we had envisioned in the city of Sacramento that would have brought a host of economic development benefits to the city of Sacramento. And what's really interesting to me is in this report, it mentions the partners. Well, I've never heard the partners mentioned before, not even the nomenclature of the partners. In the year and a half since the bids came in too high, we knew that there was a deadline if there was going to be a revisioning of the streetcar project to retain the FTA money, the $50 million small starts grant. And here we are in a squeeze play 4 days before the application is due and facing a decision about whether or not this particular light rail line, and I call it a light rail line because in my mind, it is not a streetcar project, it's a light rail project. And the vehicles that are proposed to be used, as I understand it, are low floor light rail vehicles rather than streetcar type vehicles. So here we are. I am very frustrated because over the last year and a half, the JPA is not convened. As far as I'm concerned, we were the partners. We sat at the table with West Sacramento to discuss the vision for the streetcar, the actual alignment. We wrestled with all the details of building the streetcar project, and yet the JPA was not included in this discussion of the partners to re-envision the connector project. In my opinion, and this is also shared with me by staff, certainly on the City of Sacramento side, this project does not offer benefits to the City of Sacramento, at least immediate benefits. All of the economic development benefits have gone by the wayside. In fact, it emanates from my district in District 3, but largely goes through Councilmember Hansen's district. This could be a real encumbrance to 3rd Street and the Tower Bridge. And I asked myself, for what? For that 1.1 mile of connection, it seems to me that rubber tire vehicles could be extremely effective to connect with the Sacramento Valley Station and to West Sacramento and their transit system. And expending $130 million on hard rail might not be the best decision. But what I really don't like about this staff report is that it does not analyze what this means to regional transit in terms of our finances and operations. Is this going to be a benefit for RT? Is it going to be an albatross? Is it going to be a difficulty for us as we try to rebuild ridership in the face of coming out of this pandemic? And then when you look realistically at other projects that we could pursue, like the last 3 miles to get to Elk Grove, which would net tremendous ridership and lower vehicle miles traveled in a big way and reduce congestion on Highway 99, that looks very enticing. And then, of course, there's the Green Line, which directly affects my district, and getting to the airport has been a long-term goal for RT. So do we make this decision to build it because there's $50 million on the table, and then try to chase after more dollars for the projects that we really want? That is certainly one way to proceed. It has been suggested that in the future, probably the very distant future, this could eventually connect us to the city of Davis, and that is a possibility. But, you know, when I think about all of our transportation needs, there are transportation needs that would shine for RT, and this one I think will be a difficulty for RT. And I'm concerned about the financial health of our organization and, you know, reorganizing our ridership and envisioning a really big complex of transit options as we come out of the pandemic and we move into the future. You know, I am not a fan of this project, I admit it freely. At the same time, it has been suggested to me that you never walk away from federal money, and that if you do, getting more federal money in the future would be ever so much harder. That is entirely possible. The mayor of Sacramento suggested, why think small? We can build them both. We can build it all. Well, there's a couple problems there. One is this does use $30 million of state money, and it would not necessarily go to RT for another project, but it could. You know, the TIRSIP money would enter the pool and we could apply for that as local match. I also question whether or not the FTA will look at this and see it as a viable project. It is entirely possible that the FTA will say, you know what, this is nothing like the original project. This is a new project, and therefore the small starts money is not eligible for the connector. In fact, it's been suggested to me by many people that that is a good option to apply, to let the FTA decide that it's not a good project instead of us deciding that it's not a good project. But I'm just not wired that way. I don't think in those kinds of strategic terms. To me, I look at this and say, is it good for RT? Is it good for my city? I believe it is good for the city of West Sacramento. And appropriately, they have put $25 million into the fray to make this happen. But do be aware that the $149,000 that the city of Sacramento has allocated is not enough to get this over the finish line for the application for FTA. There's a shortfall there. And for build out, there will be more shortfalls. So if RT becomes the owner and operator of this line, where do you think people are going to look for the money to finish the construction? They will come to the city of Sac and to RT to look for those funds. So those will be decisions outstanding if we move this forward. You know, I'm not saying that this project has no benefits. Again, I think it does benefit the city of West Sacramento. I think it really kind of creates a hardship for the city of Sacramento and potentially a hardship for regional transit. And so for those reasons, my decision tonight would definitely be to deny the staff recommendation and not move forward with it. But I look forward to hearing to the rest of the board members here. You may see benefits in this that I do not. Again, you know, it is somewhat of a gamble. The FTA could squash it. A positive vote supports our Congresswoman, who has been tireless in fighting for money for our region. You know, there's a lot at play here, and I look forward to your discussion moving forward. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Director Harris. Any other directors who would like to speak on this item?
I'd just like to ask if we're going to be doing these resolutions separately. And the reason I ask is because the HDR is a client of mine. So I would like to recuse from that item that directly affects HDR's contract.
Just because we don't have a motion on the table, if the motion comes about, I would just ask that we separate that one item for Director Howell to recuse herself on.
Thank you.
Steve, I'd like to say a couple words.
Director Chenier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we had, for those of you who, I'm sure all of you watch all of our council meetings for the city and saw this discussion, but we had a very long discussion. And at the end of the day, the city council of Sacramento joined with Sacramento. Actually, they came after us, but we voted in favor of moving forward with this. And I think we voted in favor of moving forward, looking at the future and the potential here. Jeff is correct that there are still a lot of unknowns, but the bottom line for me, and I believe for the majority of the council, is that the work that we put into it, the potential for moving forward is worth taking this next step. We will see what happens after that. It's totally true that we don't want to leave $50 million on the table. I had some colleagues on the council saying that could be better spent other places. Those would not be our decisions. But also the work that we've done with FTA, with federal government in getting to where we are, and particularly the work that our Congresswoman has done to help us get where we are is incredibly important as we think about a future administration in DC and what we might be eligible for as we move forward. I'd like to see this. I think it will do good as far as folks from new neighborhoods in West Sacramento getting to our light rail system and our bus system. I think that's important for RT over time and will help traffic and congestion in the city of Sacramento. So I'm not going to go long here, but I do think that there are multiple benefits of this and absolutely worth taking this next step to see if we can qualify, if FTA will go along with us. We will always have to come back for more decisions as we go forward. So I don't see a downside for RT at this point moving forward. So I'm going to move staff's recommendation on this. And I will move the recommendation and for Ms. Howell, take out, I don't have which one it is. I'm sorry. Hold on. Do we need multiple motions on this one, Mr. Chair?
I'll just take that as a separate vote. It's okay.
All right. So I want to move 7.1 A, B, C, and D, and we'll take a separate vote to conflict of interest.
Yep. Is there a second? Director Budge?
No. I wish to
No,
speak.
did you want? Yeah, no, I was turning over you to speak.
Okay, thank you. The problem that I'm having with this is that I'm very much a process person, and this is coming as a total surprise. And it's not that I don't think it's worthy of a decision. It's simply that I'm not sure there's been any appropriate process involved with this. I was Jeff's alternate on the JPA. And of course, as we all know, it hasn't met in at least a year. It seems to me, time flies. This has been an odd year. But when I look at the list of activities that have happened over this period of time, I'm really rather astounded that either the 2x2 meetings that apparently have taken place, or the staff progress that's been made have not been reported to this board, at least, and certainly perhaps to the JPA under as an information item. Lord knows, The Matsuis are a significant part of the reason we have light rail in Sacramento County to begin with. And I would never fault Doris for wanting to hang on to this amount of money in an era where earmarks are incredibly difficult to come by and were pretty much eliminated years ago. So I appreciate that point, but then you have to look at the project. And the question is, who is going to ride this thing? Where will the ridership come from? There's very few riders who actually take the train, light rail, all the way to the Sacramento Valley station. When my family wants to go to the River Cats game, we get off at Capitol Avenue and call Uber to go over the bridge because not everybody in our family walks well. And you can be dropped at the front door. It just strikes me as completely illogical that people are going to. This is a project with only one destination, and the one destination is the River Cats games. It's wonderful that people might want to go to Old Sacramento because that's what's adjacent to the Sacramento Valley station. But in reality, the only reason to take this cute little line is to go to the River Cats games. And remembering those meetings that I attended, and there weren't a lot of them, but I did attend some of them, and hearing the very powerful arguments from both cities, it seems to me that this little line with only 3 stops is not going to be used, especially if the only stop along, if it doesn't connect to the light rail and the only stop along this line is at 2nd and Capitol. That means you've got to walk 6 blocks in Lord knows what kind of weather from where you get off on light rail all the way down to where this little line runs. And it's really more like a trolley. Does anybody remember the cute little historic looking trolleys that ran up and down K Street and used to take people back and forth between the convention center and Old Sacramento? That's the kind of thing that this line is asking for, not an expensive rail line. The 1.5 million that was quoted as the maintenance argument. Thank you, West Sacramento, but there's no commitment to helping to fund the maintenance. It just doesn't seem like a wise project. And I have a concern.
Thank you, Director Budge. Anybody else wish to comment? Director Hume.
Thank you, Chair. I used the raise your hand feature on the participant list, but apparently I don't know where that shows up.
That's on Zoom, but we're on WebEx.
No, it's in my WebEx application.
Cindy might see that, but I don't because I'm not the host.
Oh, you're not the host.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Nope. So my question actually is for you, Henry. Is this something even that RT wants to take on? I realize that there's money being dangled, but it's being offered to RT to take ownership. Is this something that RT even wants?
Director Hume, thank you for asking this question. I want to just share a story with you. This morning, the FTA Regional Line administrator in San Francisco called me. He said he's so happy to say Sac County Board picks up on this item tonight. And I was surprised. He even, look at our board agenda and told me that. This shows FTA has been, really wanting to get this stuff moving. And, needless to say, Congresswoman, has, been advocating for this for the whole time. I appreciate, Director Harris said about we should try to spend money on the library extension to the airport and to the airport. Well, that's certainly, was the plan before the Measure A, was trying to move forward. And if we want to ever have the library extension to Elk Grove and to airport, we're going to need about $500 million to $800 million, or even $1 billion from the FTA. So from that perspective, if we give up this $50 million, FTA will be very disappointed in us. Will make RT, very difficult to get future FTA money. I'm just telling the truth. And so that, from that perspective, should we look at the future of this region? Well, stuck with this project. I mean, I totally get what Director Budge and Director Harris's opinion about in the past. The communication was lacking. It's so complicated, this project, because until now, SAC-RT was not the owner of this project. It's two cities with JPA. So it's very difficult to for staff to bring this up to the board, to ask you guys to approve something. We did ask the board to approve multiple project funding. And actually February this year, December last year, and also the board meeting, 2 board meetings ago, and we brought this to the board agenda, but in the last minute was put out. Like Laura said, if staff did not reflect all our board members' opinions, staff apologize for that. It's just something, it's so difficult to say we want to give up this project. And this does not in line with this region's best interest. I just stop here. I just want to, our board to know this is something, staff has tried our best to build relationship with all the partners. It's not just this project. It's going to, affect many future projects, the bigger, much bigger projects in the future.
Anything else, Director Hume?
Well, I appreciate that perspective, and I'm glad that I asked the question. But just as an aside, op-ed here, I think that's indicative of sort of the problem of how governance works. That rather than reward us for asking the FTA to spend the money more prudently, we would be punished for future funding rounds. That just is absolutely backwards to me.
Any other directors wish to speak? Otherwise, I'll make a few comments. Since Carrie hasn't spoken, I'll turn it over to Carrie, and then maybe you don't mind, Mr. Harris, if I go after Carrie. I mean, Director Howell. Go ahead, Director Howell. You're on mute.
Okay.
Cindy, I think she unmuted herself, so you don't need to unmute her. There you go.
Okay. I'm going to kind of go back to Jeff's comment. As much as I'd like to take this money, and I agree with Pat that this is ridiculous that there would be a disincentive for future projects, but if Linda's right, and the vast majority of the use for this is going to be going to River Cats games, it's going to be a seasonal thing. And I like the idea that Jeff mentioned that it should be rubber-tired vehicles, and maybe the cute little trolleys that used to run around in Folsom, not that anybody ever rode them, and the ones that were on K Street, that would be a much better use for something like that. That perhaps are maybe even available in electric versions now, but I don't see that this is being a regular ride. It's a cutesy thing, and I don't see it being anything that's even going to generate a tourism in terms of economic development. So, and I would think that doing it with rubber-tired vehicles is going to be dramatically less expensive. go after the money to try to get light rail up to the airport. That's just my feeling.
Okay. Any other directors who haven't spoken? Otherwise, I'll just give it a few thoughts. I think this is a hard decision. Transit in the time of COVID has really reshaped not only how our priorities happen, but also just the existential nature of the business we do. It does seem as if we're faring better than other agencies, larger agencies that were maybe not as well managed as we are now, although there was a time where we would have been in a great deal of hurt despite some of the decisions, or because of some of the decisions the board members have made along with the staff. We are in a much better position. We have several projects underway that we're actively working on: the double tracking of the Green Line through the rail yards, double tracking to Folsom. While the Measure A supplement was pulled off the ballot, I sincerely believe, and Director Harris and others have mentioned this, that in order to further decongest our freeways and provide access to transit, we have to grow south and north as well. And Director Hume probably knows very well the long history I have with trying to advocate for a blue line extension to Elk Grove. And, ironically, SACOG being the agency that told us that that was inappropriate because of ridership, although SACOG is extremely supportive of this particular project, despite what would seem to be initial ridership estimates that are anemic. I would say on the flip side of that coin, because we don't have a supplemental measure, our ability to find local match for our Sacramento County projects is very difficult. This project is a little bit different because we are crossing the county boundary. And those of you who are familiar with RT's enabling legislation knows that Yolo County and the jurisdictions in Yolo County have the right to annex in to the district should they so choose, partially or fully. And I think it's an interesting opportunity here, not just to connect to Sutter Health Park, which used to be known as Raley Field, but the DGS headquarters at the Ziggurat, CalSTRS, which is just blocks off of the stop and is building a second tower. There are significant plans for the Bridge District. Of them announced as the pandemic hit was a large hotel between Capitol Mall and the Ziggurat by Mark Friedman and the Raley's family, Mike Teal. So I do think that as we think about the region, there is an opportunity to grow west, and the vast majority of the local match here is going to be provided by the city of West Sacramento, and then those state cap and trade funds, which were originally awarded to what was a streetcar project. I think this is just a streetcar project in name only. This is really a light rail extension project. And the interesting challenge or opportunity for us is, can this be extended out past West Sacramento to Davis so that there can be very significant benefits in bringing what is heavy commuter traffic to and from Davis onto mass transit. Now, we have launched some very significant projects with Yolo Bus, the Causeway Connector being one of those, and we'll build ridership between the two cities. We have also launched in collaboration with Yolo Bus, the airport service, which is currently on hiatus right now. And Director Budge, we've had two 2x2 meetings, one just a week ago, almost all focused on operational discussions about COVID, handling COVID's impact, level of service, and managing those two projects that we're currently in collaboration with. Director Vice Chair Miller is the other person on that 2x2. And I think it is beginning to be not only fruitful, but demonstrate that we have a lot more in common and a lot more to gain by working together. I think in the grand scheme of things, if we had local match for the American River crossing, which I asked at the council meeting last week be prioritized, and that the city take over the bridge project to help advance that while RT works on some of the other pieces of the Green Line to the airport, that indeed unless and until we have more local match and or a different administration freeing up money, this is probably one of the few projects that does have both the congressional earmark and West Sacramento has a specific tax identified to pay for their match. I don't know that that answers all of the questions or the concerns, but I do think it's a lot more than just a 1.1 mile to Rayleigh Field. I think it's the beginning of a partnership across the causeway as our relationships with certainly Folsom, Citrus Heights, Rancho Cordova, and Elk Grove demonstrate. We don't always know what the future of some of these cities are, but as you've become part of the agency, I don't think this agency would be better off without having you in. And so I think this is just another opportunity to do what our basic mission is, which is to provide useful transit. Doesn't mean we can fix everything, but I do think it's a worthwhile step forward. And at this point, the reason that I recommended the JPA be dissolved is we haven't been able to get the responsiveness out of the JPA that we needed. The two cities originally took ownership of the project to save money on utility relocation because of right of way, because those were mainly Midtown concerns, and that this project doesn't cross into Midtown and won't have those utility relocation concerns. It makes sense to devolve this to RT. It's something we heard from the FTA when they were looking at streetcar, is that cities that built and operated streetcar projects didn't do a very good job of it, but that transit agencies that did a very good job at it. And so I think that in the end, this is a very low risk decision for us. I have my doubts about the project, and I don't really disagree with Director Harris in the substance, but I do think that the risk analysis tells me that at this point, this is a thoughtful decision and one that we should take the next step on to allow the staff to take the money from the city of West Sacramento and the city of Sacramento to finish up a project proposal. And if FTA funds it, FTA funds it. If it doesn't, we'll go back to working on all of our other projects. So I'll second Director Schneer's motion.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Natoli.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Thanks for your comments. I just wanted to follow on to Henry's response to Director Hume's inquiry a moment ago. Henry, I don't know if I clearly understood or not. I want to be sure. Did I understand you to say that if we didn't pursue this, that somehow it would diminish our opportunities with the FTA in the future? And if so, why is that?
Director Antonio, thank you for letting me explain that. Actually, I meant to if you did not ask me, I want to say something. When I said, the FTA regional administrator, even look at our board agenda on this, and I was very surprised. What I try to say, they are very, very, care, they care about us, and then they pay attention to us. And I'm not saying, if we do not move forward this time, then they will somehow, kind of affect our future funding, application. I'm just trying to say, if we kind of they will say this region seems, because we work so hard and the JPA and the cities and RT ask for this money. Now, after 5-6 years later, we say, hey, we don't want your money anymore. That just feel, from the federal government perspective, they might feel, hey, next time if you apply for some money, put your acts together first. And I'm not trying to say FTA will react to us in the future in a positive or negative way. And I don't want, our FTA partners feel in that way, too. I mean, they will do absolutely professional job, and they will try to, use the, strict criteria or standards to evaluate our future projects application.
Okay, thanks, Henry. If I could just ask one other question then, Mr. Chair. In the revised project funding, the carryover is from the $30 million from the cap and trade. Is that money firmly there only for this project? Has that been roped off? And that was done in 2016? So that's been nearly, well, almost 4.5 years ago. And is there any question about that? Because, you know, this new project proposal has 11.5 million almost of what would be a future Measure A potentially. So I guess I'm curious about the $30 million.
As far as I understand, the cap and trade money is still available to this project, which is a smaller version of the prior project. But if we don't act some way to preserve that, I don't believe we can repurpose that, just like we can't repurpose the federal money. So we would relinquish that 30 million and then the 50. And I would say that, you know, whether it was Governor Brown or Governor Newsom, Congresswoman Matsui, the region has had very strong support. And if I firmly believe that if we had more local match available, the two other light rail extensions would be further along. But that, given the status of current Measure A and the delay of future Measure A, that's just not the reality we're in at the moment.
Okay, just one final question then. In the background paper, the timeline that Laura went over earlier, and I guess about the sixth bullet, it says in January 2020, FTA recommended that change of mode was not favorable. What was the change of mode? Calling this a light rail extension versus a streetcar, or what was the?
I'll let staff ask, but I believe we were going to do a rubber tire option.
Okay, that's the tire. Okay.
Can you confirm that, Daryl or Laura?
Yeah. That's correct. Actually, both of those options would be considered a change of mode, a change to light rail or a change to a rubber tire option.
Which is why we still call it streetcar.
Yeah.
But a rose by any other name would still roll the same. Or as Linda was calling it, this little line of mine.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Anyway.
It's really a streetcar project, not streetcar, light rail project. We try to make sure that people in Folsom can ride directly to the west side, and the west side people can directly to Folsom. That's probably, one of the benefits, the part of, the whole team was thinking about.
Yeah, the other point, not to interrupt, but because it does emanate from Jeff's district, which has the intermodal hub of the Sacramento Valley Station, it is where regional rail also deposits folks and allows for that connectivity up through the Auburn area all the way down to the Bay Area, and then the San Joaquin corridor trains will eventually stop there, as well as Midtown station. So I think it does connect on the other end to something significant. Anyway, Director Harris wanted to speak next, unless somebody else wants to go after him.
I've never seen Chris Cabaldan in Folsom.
Well, you would know if he were there because he would post about it.
Barry, if you vote for this, I'll get him out there.
Welcome.
He would.
We'll come to your restaurant.
Great.
Director Harris.
Thank you, Chair. First, I'd like to clarify a couple of things. As City Council, I put forward a motion to deny the $149,000 allocated to the project, and it was a 3-3 vote with one abstention, so it did not carry. And then subsequently, it did move forward. You know, we built the Green Line a long time ago, and the Green Line has gone to Township 9 for 6 or 7 years and lost money every year. The vision was that, okay, this is the beginning of a great thing. This is the beginning of getting to the river. We'll get across the river. We'll get to Natomas and connect 20% of the population of Sacramento. Great goals, noble goals, and goals we have not achieved. And RT has lost money each and every year on the Green Line ever since. Things have changed. Now we have the DGS project. We have the prospect of MLS. And now the Green Line, after 7 years or so, has the potential to come into its own. So you could look at this connector project through that lens. As Steve has mentioned, that this could be a great connector to another county, to get across a river, to expand RT's reach. I don't deny that there is potential, but really two things. Linda mentioned process. This is the most opaque process I have seen in my years as an elected. It has not been vetted with the constituents. It hasn't been talked about at council. This has really gone under the radar, and that upsets me greatly. The second thing is, who are we to believe? I mean, would not the FTA say they came to their senses and realized that they have better projects, and what they're doing here is fitting the project to the money rather than creating a great project and then finding the funding to build it? You know, you have to weigh those measures yourself. But Henry, I want to ask you specifically, and this is problematic for me. Where is the estimate of ridership on this line, this light rail line? And I find it incredibly contradictory that the FTA does not want a mode change, so we're calling it streetcar when in fact we admit openly that it's a light rail line. To me, that just doesn't make sense. It just prompts me. But will this line cost RT money? Will it be a money loser? And what kind of ridership do you project at this point?
Dr. Harris, the answer to your first question about the ridership, I think one of the studies we need this money to conduct is the ridership. What will the ridership look like in the future? So that's the answer to your ridership question. The second question you talk about, why change to the river tile, project to the streetcar project is because if we change the mode, then the all current, funding sources we identified, we will have to reapply first. And that will be another additional 5 years process. So that's why we keep that as a streetcar project.
But will this be a good thing or a bad thing for RT in the next 5 years? Will it cost us money? Will it put stress on the organization and its finances?
The real cost would be the operating cost in the future, about $1.5 million every year. And certainly, we will sign an operation and the maintenance agreement with Sac. They will pay part of that cost. Then that will leave less than $1 million for Sac RT. And we were thinking about if the Measure A, passes, then we should be able to have, that money to run in the future. That was the original, thought process.
So, predicting whether or not Measure A can pass in 2022 as a deciding factor in accepting this project, I think is pretty nebulous and somewhat worrisome because the pandemic could hold many surprises for us. And in my opinion, trying to prognosticate what will happen with the STA measure is a very, very hard call to make. And if we need that money to make this project make sense, to me, that would be another deciding factor against taking this on as RT.
Dr. Harris, just want to, very likely, for the after operation for the first 5 years, we will be able to get a carpentry money from state for the operational purpose. So at least for the first 5 years. Yeah, for the first 5 years, we should be fine.
Yeah. Well, I guess ultimately it comes down to a decision about whether adopting this project slows us down on other projects or helps us along because FDA holds us in higher esteem. I don't really have the answer to that. I agree with that it's hard for me to believe that FTA would not see our reapplication for our other projects as being much more viable and things that they would love to support in lieu of this one. But it's been made clear that if you walk away from federal money, this is just generally not a good thing. And perhaps it does make it harder to get. I would admit to not being well schooled in this area. I don't really know how the FTA works, but it does defy common sense.
Thank you, Director Harris. Director Budge, but I know that at least one director has to leave in about 10 minutes. So I would ask that, yes.
Yeah, short comment. In reality, this may or may not be a good idea. The problem is because it's been so little discussed, and we're down to the wire. There are issues that could have been solved if it had some daylight. For instance, thinking about Jeff's comment, there's a very specific sentence in here that says, if none of the partners agree to share in the O&M costs, SAC-RT would be responsible for the entire amount. Yes, we hope there would be money to help fund the operations and maintenance, but it's one of the loose ends. And yet we're being asked tonight to make a final decision on a project that may or may not be a good idea, but it's not fully fleshed out.
I would just say that there are many other decision points still to come. I don't disagree that there's a lot to sort out. Henry mentioned that this item was supposed to be on our agenda a few weeks ago. It was pulled off at Director Harris's request so that the two cities could work through some of their issues. I concurred in his request because the cities have largely concurred, and we had a 7-3 or 6-3 vote at our council last week, which is very strong vote still. And ultimately RT just needs to decide if it wants to provide this service, but that decision is not dependent on approving the contracts and the amended agreements. A decision will come later with the dissolution of the JPA affiliation agreement with West Sacramento that will define some of those cost issues. And I think it's a very fair thing to direct the staff to work through those issues and to ensure that RT doesn't have risk. So, but I haven't heard any other motions. And so unless there's further debate, I would like to call the question.
Yeah, and Steve, if I could say two things very quickly. I just want to emphasize that. Thank you. One, this is a next step. It's not the final step, as Steve said. So there will be other decision points that this board will be able to take a look at. And two is that this does not exclude us from other things like light rail to the airport. I do think it makes it more, gives us a better shot at it because of the relationship that we will keep building with FTA. So I think it's important to go that far. These monies are not interchangeable for other projects. So we do this or we leave potentially $80 on the table.
I have a demanding constituent who would like me to make him dinner.
Yeah, well, that's important, but this is $130 million we're talking about. So the HDR item that I asked to be pulled a couple of weeks ago was not what the board sees before it now in terms of taking ownership and operation of the light rail line. It was simply a vote to forward money to HDR to do further engineering.
It was approval of the agreement that is amended before us, just to be clear. But with that, barring any other debate, let's have a roll call vote on the items that are not the HDR extension.
Thank you, Chair Hansen. That would be items A, C, and D. The roll call vote, Director Budge on A, C, and D only.
No.
Director Harris?
No.
Director Howell?
No.
Was that a no, Director Howell?
Yes, that was no.
Thank you. Recorded as a no. Director Hume?
No.
Director Jennings,
Yeah.
Director Kennedy,
Aye.
Director Miller is marked as being absent. Director Natoli,
No.
Director Chenier,
Aye.
Director Cerna,
Aye.
Chair Hansen.
Aye.
And the vote tally is motion passes. Oh, not passed, I'm sorry. 48 yes, 42 no, no abstentions, and not voted 10. Motion does not pass.
Should we take up the other resolution given that vote?
Certainly. We're voting on item 7.1D as in boy. The third amendment to the downtown riverfront streetcar design services for HDR. Director Budge,
No.
Director Harris,
No.
Director Howell,
Recuse.
so noted. Director Hume,
No.
Director Jennings,
Yeah.
Director Kennedy,
Aye.
Director Miller is marked as being absent. Director Natoli,
No.
Director Chenier,
Aye.
Director Cerna,
Aye.
Chair Hansen.
Aye.
The item does not pass. It had 48 yeses, 33 noes, 1 abstention at 9 votes, and not voted at 10 votes. So all of the item 7.1 does not pass.
Okay, directors, staff, just given the commentary and the vote, Henry, I'd ask you to reach out to our partners and convey the news. And if there's any follow-up that needs to be done based on the comments, to please do that.
Yes.
All right, I think we just have the director's report left.
Yes, item 8.1, the general manager's report.
I just have a 1 minute report. I just want to thank all staff that has been working tirelessly to keep the trains and the buses moving under such extraordinary circumstances, the fire, smoke, all this type of bad things happening in addition to the COVID-19. And from fires to extreme and prolonged heat, the challenges have been immense and put a significant strain on our infrastructure. And in one such instance last week, the heat stress led to damage to the light rail overhead cutlery system. Thankfully, the Sacramento team quickly and safely responded to the situation and did a tremendous job communicating to the customers and ensuring they were able to get to their final destinations. And we get multiple customers compliments letters, and we had the 4 supervisors working with work on that situation and quickly get our customers transport to other vehicles. And 1 supervisor actually drove 4 customers to the destinations. So I just want to let the board know how extremely we're proud of the work that Sacramento staff has performed to keep the system operating under these intense conditions. That concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
Is there any staff presentation or is that it, Henry?
No, that's it.
Okay. Madam Clerk, any other items?
Not unless any board of directors have any reports or questions or comments to provide.
I don't see or hear any.
Okay, at this time, I will call the closed session. Item 13.1, conference with legal counsel pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9 D as in David, anticipated litigation 1 case. So at this time, we'll ask everybody to exit the meeting except for our board of directors and those involved in closed session.